Hi everybody, welcome to week 5 of your Practicum course. Sorry I'm getting to this a little late this evening. It's been one of those days, and now it is pouring here in Salt Lake City, and apparently around midnight it's supposed to turn over to snow. And I don't care because I'm off tomorrow and I don't have to get up early, so I'm kind of excited about the snow. Anyway, back to week 5. So let's see, this week we're looking at competency 3, right? Assessment and evaluation. In nursing education, there are all sorts of evaluation strategies. And as you read the chapter about competency 3, I want you to remember that the NLN book that you're reading, I believe, is a 2007 text. And they're in the process of coming out. I think they may have just released kind of an updated version. Anyway, so what that means is a lot of the research that has been done on evaluation strategies was not yet available in 2007. So at this point in time, there are many more evidence-based assessment and evaluation strategies than what was written at the time that Halstead was putting all that information together. So I just want you to keep in mind as you read through that chapter. All right, so when we discuss assessment and evaluation, we need to look at formative and summative, right? Okay, those are the two things. And while we tend to focus a lot, especially in nursing school, but to some extent in the clinical arena, on multiple choice test questions, we also need to broaden our strategies to encompass the different ways of learning, knowing, and demonstrating competency. So many options, oh my goodness. Classroom polling technology, debates, writing position papers, formulating concept maps. I mean, there's just so many ways to do assessment and evaluation. But in reality, we do use many multiple choice exams. We do want our students to eventually pass the NCLEX, and sometimes with things like online learning modules for, let's say, mandatory education in the clinical setting, it is a little bit easier to create a brief multiple choice quiz to demonstrate competency. So we can never really escape those multiple choice test questions. So if you're in a position where you have to write test questions and you actually want them to be effective, okay, because there are a lot of multiple choice test questions that are not effective in any way, shape, or form. But the best resource I found, and I'll tell you, even though you're looking at it backwards right now, is the Nurse Educator's Guide to Assessing Learning Outcomes. It's a 3rd edition, Nurse Educator's Guide to Assessing Learning Outcomes by Mary McDonald. This woman is good. She really makes you tie together your objectives, your content, and your evaluation methods. And she really gets into the mechanics and nitty-gritty of creating effective multiple choice questions that are written at least the application level or higher. Because if we're just writing them at the recall or understanding level, we're not showing that people can actually apply that knowledge, right? Only if questions are written at the application level or higher are we showing that they can use what they have learned. Okay. She presents it in a very straightforward manner. It's a good read, lots of good examples. So I would, if you find yourself in a role where that's something that you're going to need to be doing a lot, I would strongly recommend that text. It's available on Amazon, of course, just like everything, right? Okay, so, but if you're not quite up yet for another book, I know you've got a lot of regular and electronic texts. I am attaching a bunch of handouts. Some of them were from, there's a company called Nurse Tim that provides continuing education for nurses and nurse educators. Some of them are from a course I took through them. A couple of them are some PowerPoints that I came across that I thought were really good. And so some of them the PowerPoints make you kind of think about the connectiveness of objective content, questions, that sort of thing. And some of the other handouts are really invaluable. They're stems. And a STEM question is like a template of a question. And they're stems that you can use to assess different parts of the nursing process, different disease process, different nursing interventions. So I think they're really, really useful. So if I were you, I would download them, put them someplace on your computer or on a thumb drive, hang on to them. You never know when they might come in handy. They're a really good resource. Okay, so a couple more things. Thanks for getting in your NEPD forms. I'll be looking over them over the next few days and giving a little bit of feedback, and we'll go from there. Finally, I wanted to share with you some thoughts. Remember, I am reading this concept-based curriculum book, because I got to tell you, concept-based curriculum is just the hot trend in nursing education. And so I really want you to at least be exposed to some different ideas about that. Okay, so the part that I want to comment on tonight is clinical. Now, you remember that I shared with you about concepts that are kind of like threads. Oxygenation, perfusion, professionalism, those concepts. And we teach through a concept. And one of the examples that I use is like cardiac anomaly and perfusion. We might address acute alteration in perfusion across the lifespan. So neonate through geriatric in class, okay? In clinical, we will very much be focused on cardiac and perfusion. Instead of, now let's say this is like a first-year nursing student, okay? Instead of going in and providing total care for the patient or just providing CNA care for the patient, the students will focus on cardiac alteration and perfusion. They will do multiple cardiac assessments. They will assess perfusion status. We will do case reviews of patients with cardiac and perfusion issues, and we'll apply the classroom to the actual clinical setting, and we'll coordinate it in that same week. Okay, so it might not be a traditional clinical. Well, students come before the shift, have a patient, they research that patient, they hook up with the nurse that's taking care of that patient, and they focus on that patient all day. It might look very, very different. It might look like all the nurses spreading them out around and going from unit to unit and doing all these cardiac assessments and issues related with perfusion and doing case studies where we look at the care of patients with cardiac alterations and perfusion issues. So anyway, it can look very different. This would be a major mindset change for the instructor and for the clinical facility that those students are going to. So this concept-based curriculum isn't just teaching things a little bit different. This is a paradigm shift, and it's huge. So let me see. What I would like then for a question is, what do you think about the pros and cons to this change in clinical for the early part of clinical? Now, of course, for later nursing students, they do have to combine all these things together to take care of the whole patient, right? But we're not asking them to do that on the front end. We're trying to fine-tune and allow them to take a deep dive into particular areas. So I think there's pros and cons, and I'd really like to hear from you what you think the pros and cons are to that approach to clinical, okay? And like I said, it's across the lifespan. So they could be in the nursery, they could be in med-surg, they could be in the ER. I mean, hey, it could be all over the place. So I want you to just think about that and let me know your thoughts. All right, go forth and educate, and I'll see you in the main forum.